Imagine being an elite federal agent, a guy whose literal 9-to-5 job is catching people in complex, high-stakes lies. You know exactly what digital footprints look like. You know how the police think, how they secure a scene, and what evidence they look for first. Now imagine using all that insider knowledge to stage a double fatality in your own home, making it look like a terrifying, random home invasion. That is exactly what investigators said happened on the very morning of February 24th, 2023. A 911 call comes in, a calm voice on the other end says an intruder broke in and 2 people are left dead on the floor. But the forensics told a completely different story. And the wildest part? The whole thing unraveled because of a burner phone and a dark corner of the internet. How does a federal agent make such a fatal miscalculation? If you want to uncover the unvarnished truth behind dark cases like this, please hit subscribe and support Top Crime Cases. To really understand how this all fell apart, we have to look at the foundation Brendan and Christine Banfield had built. To the outside world, this was a picture-perfect scenario. They lived in a pristine, upper-middle-class suburban home in Reston, Virginia. It is the kind of neighborhood where lawns are perfectly manicured and crime feels like something that happens somewhere else. Their professional lives were demanding, intense, and highly successful. Brendan carried a badge and a gun as an elite federal law enforcement agent. Specifically, he was a high-level IRS criminal investigation special agent. Now, when most people think of the IRS, they think of taxes and audits, but criminal investigation agents are essentially the accountants with guns. They track hidden assets, take down massive financial fraud rings, and expose criminal cover-ups. Brendan was a master of the system. He knew how investigations worked from the inside out. Christine, on the other hand, spent her days saving lives. She worked long, high-stakes hours as an intensive care unit nurse. The irony here is absolutely heartbreaking. She dedicated her life to pulling people back from the brink, dealing with families on their worst days, and providing genuine care. Together, they had a young daughter, and from the outside looking in, they had a life that looked entirely complete. But behind closed doors, managing 2 high-pressure careers while raising a child takes a toll. To manage their conflicting schedules, the couple made a decision that would ultimately act as the catalyst for everything that followed. They hired a 22-year-old Brazilian au pair named Juliana Peres Magalhães. She was brought in to live in their home and help care for their daughter. On paper, it was a totally practical, common solution for 2 working professionals in that area. In reality, it was the beginning of a fatal fracture in the Banfield household. Court records later revealed that a secret relationship developed between Brendan and Juliana. A shift happened in the dynamic of the home. But this is where the story takes a turn that is hard to wrap your head around. The prosecution argued that simply walking away from his marriage through a standard divorce was never Brendan's plan. If you want out of a marriage, you call a lawyer, right? You figure out custody, you split the assets, and you move on. But according to the state, that wasn't what happened here. Instead, digital forensic evidence showed the meticulous, step-by-step creation of a trap. During the trial, investigators presented data showing the creation of a profile on a specific alternative lifestyle and fetish website called FetLife. Now, the internet is a vast place, and police said Brendan used a burner phone and a fake persona to navigate it safely, or so he thought. From the Banfield residence, a highly specific advertisement was posted. The ad was looking for a man willing to participate in a staged, forced fantasy scenario. The man who answered that online advertisement was Joseph Ryan. And it is so important that we talk about Joseph as a human being, not just a pawn in this case. He was a man who was struggling with his daily life, looking for connection or perhaps just an escape. He was completely unaware that he was walking into a lethal setup. According to the verified digital timeline and the recovered messages presented in court, Ryan genuinely believed he was arriving for a consensual adult arrangement. He thought everyone involved knew exactly what was happening. Wow. It is deeply unsettling to think about someone walking up to a front door, entirely oblivious to the reality waiting on the other side. This specific part of the case brings up a major legal debate that happened during the trial, and it is something worth thinking about. Where exactly is the line between proving a pattern of behavior and biasing a jury with a defendant's private life? The defense argued fiercely that introducing digital evidence from fetish websites was highly prejudicial. They stated it would unfairly bias the jury against Brendan's character, painting him in a weird light rather than sticking strictly to the crime itself. The prosecution countered that this data was an absolutely essential piece of forensic evidence. They argued it proved premeditation, showing exactly how the trap was set, who set it, and how Joseph Ryan was lured to the house. Was introducing the FetLife data essential to show the timeline, or did it risk creating character bias? The court ultimately sided with the prosecution and allowed the digital data to tell the story. Before we continue, make sure to drop a like on this video if you appreciate us sticking to the verified facts and court documents. It really helps the channel grow and lets us keep bringing you these deep dives. The timeline of what happened next was reconstructed linearly by law enforcement. They didn't rely on stories. They used cell phone tower pings, emergency dispatch data, and physical forensics. On the morning of February 24th, 2023, Joseph Ryan arrived at the Reston house. Inside the home, the situation rapidly turned violent. The exact sequence of the struggle is something only the people in that room truly know, but the physical results were undeniable. Christine Banfield was stabbed multiple times in her bedroom. Joseph Ryan was shot at close range. 2 people lost their lives in a matter of moments. The emergency call captured the immediate aftermath, and it is a chilling piece of evidence. Juliana dialed 911 first, but very quickly, Brendan took the phone from her. In the recording, which was scrutinized by investigators, he calmly explained to the dispatcher that he had shot an intruder to protect his family. Holy moly. Think about the nerves it takes to get on a recorded line with emergency services, surrounded by a tragedy, and deliver a perfectly calm, controlled narrative. From the very first statement, the story presented to law enforcement was clear and direct. A stranger broke into the home, attacked Christine, and Brendan, acting as a protector, used his firearm to stop the threat. But when Fairfax County detectives actually arrived on the scene, things immediately felt off. The physical evidence simply did not align with a random break-in. Police are trained to read crime scenes like a book. Crime scene diagrams, the specific blood splatter analysis, and the positioning of the bodies told a vastly different story than the one Brendan gave on the phone. Crucially, forensics determined that Joseph Ryan had no weapon of his own. If this was a violent home invasion by a stranger, where was the intruder's weapon? Furthermore, the angle and distance of the shots fired didn't match the frantic, chaotic struggle you would expect from a surprise attack. The stark discrepancy between the physical evidence in the room and the initial intruder defense prompted detectives to dig deeper. They didn't just look at the physical room, they looked at the digital room. That is when they uncovered the burner phones. That is when they found the exact timestamps of his online searches. Investigators cross-referenced the IP addresses, the FetLife messages, and the cell tower data. It was a digital web that pointed directly back to the federal agent who thought he had covered his tracks. Justice, however, moved at a deliberate pace. These kinds of cases are not solved in 48 hours like on television. The case was built on a slow, methodical burn of digital forensics and cell site analysis. Months later, Juliana was arrested. Eventually, a grand jury indicted Brendan Banfield, framing him not just as a participant, but as the mastermind behind the entire plot. When it came time for the legal proceedings, prosecutors made a very specific choice. They chose to try the co-conspirators in separate trials. This legal strategy is fascinating. It is often used by the state to leverage one defendant against another or to prevent conflicting defense strategies from muddying the jury's view. If you put them both at the same defense table, they can point fingers at each other, creating reasonable doubt for both. But this strategy also raises an open question. Did separating the trials allow the prosecution to build a cleaner, undeniable timeline against Brendan, or did it complicate the public's understanding of who actually pulled which trigger and when? During all of this, there was a major piece of circumstantial evidence that severely damaged the defendants' claims of innocence. It was their post-crime timeline. You would think that after a traumatic event where a wife and a stranger lose their lives in a violent struggle, the survivors would be in shock, grieving, and traumatized. But police records and witness testimony showed something else. After Christine and Joseph passed away, Brendan and Juliana continued their romantic relationship. No way, right? But it is true. They even moved into a new home together while the investigation was actively closing in on them, long before their eventual arrests. The court viewed this as a glaring indicator of their state of mind and their true intentions. It is hard to sell a jury on a tragic random accident when you are setting up a new life with the au pair just weeks later. By early 2026, the trial reached its heavy conclusion. Both sides presented their cases. The defense maintained that Brendan was protecting his home and that the digital evidence was being twisted to fit a narrative. The prosecution laid out the digital breadcrumbs, the burner phones, the lack of a weapon on the victim, and the undeniable affair. The jury listened. Brendan Banfield was found guilty of aggravated murder. In June 2026, the judge handed down the final sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Reporters and people in the courtroom noted that during the sentencing, Brendan maintained a stone-cold demeanor. He showed very little, if any, outward emotion as his freedom was permanently stripped away. In the state of Virginia, aggravated murder carries a mandatory life sentence. The judge did not have wide discretion to be lenient even if they wanted to. The law is the law. But this leaves us with a final discussion point to ponder. Was a life sentence inevitable simply because of the strict statutory laws of Virginia, or did the deeply calculated, premeditated nature of using an innocent stranger as a pawn seal Banfield's fate, regardless of the state statutes? Brendan Banfield spent his entire career studying how people try to hide their crimes. He knew how the system worked. He knew how audits caught the smallest inconsistencies. Yet in the end, his own meticulous planning left behind a massive trail of digital evidence that he simply couldn't erase. He wanted a new life, free of his marriage, but his cold calculation cost two completely innocent people their lives. Christine Banfield was robbed of her future and her daughter. Joseph Ryan was lured into a situation that ended his life. And for what? For a plot that ultimately left Brendan Banfield the rest of his days behind bars. It is a stark reminder that no matter how smart you think you are, the truth usually finds a way to the surface. I want to know what you think about this. Do you think the prosecution's strategy to try Brendan and Juliana separately was the right move for getting justice, or does it leave too many unanswered questions about what happened in that room? Drop your thoughts and answers in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching, and stay safe out there.